access to basic needs improve. There are lots of debates on whether African countries should take any firm commitments with regard to climate agenda, famously known as net zero carbon emissions. If African countries were to do this, they would realize the need for a balanced energy mix that will include the same percentage of the same energy technologies of the successful nations. With this gathering being on nuclear power and nuclear industry, all that the African nations have to do is to critically look at what has worked in the successful nations. Nuclear energy solutions have also worked in the successful nations and has to be looked at as such, as it has ensured both security supply of energy and climate efficiency, together with a certain impact on economic growth. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to discuss how African countries should make decisions about their future energy mix and what is the place of their nuclear power in their energy security and energy transition strategies. I'd like to introduce my first speaker, and that is Dr. Ahmed El-Wakil, who is the board chairperson of the Nuclear Power Plants Authority here in Egypt. Welcome, Mr. Dr. El-Wakil. Dr. El-Wakil, Egypt has a certain expertise in nuclear technologies since 1961, thanks to the operating research reactor. Now the country is in the middle of constructing their first nuclear power plant, which is a large project with 4 units of 1,200 megawatts each. What key challenges do you see in regards of this project in terms of development of regulation, personnel training, availability of infrastructure facilities, and others? And also, what can you advise other African countries who consider developing nuclear energy projects? Can we try and switch it on?
Thank you so much for your question. And I'm going to answer this question starting from macroscopic point of view to a microscopic point of view, from a country point of view to my entity point of view. From macroscopic point of view, I think that the main challenge that any new country can face or may face is the presence of proper infrastructure. And when I talk about proper infrastructure, I'm not talking here about the project infrastructure. I'm talking about the country infrastructure, the proper legal framework, the proper regulatory framework, the HRD plans and policies, the selection of, or a proper selection of site. So you cannot start negotiating a contract for large reactor without having a proper infrastructure in place. And this is a main challenge for any new country, actually. The second challenge is the harmony of stakeholders. Because in any new country, it is actually difficult for many entities within the country to work together in harmony, because there is no common understanding for the nuclear terminology. There is no common understanding for the nuclear power requirements. To make sure that all stakeholders are working in harmony and for the benefit of the program, this is not easy. And it requires a lot of efforts. And actually, in this point, I advise that the new country get help from the agency, IAEA, because I believe that INEER mission, for example, can help the country to evaluate its nuclear infrastructure and its readiness to start its program. This is a second challenge that any new country may face, especially in the beginning of its program. Moving from country point of view to an entity point of view, in NBBA, which is the future operator of all nuclear power plants in Egypt, we faced a unique challenge, which is the transformation of NBBA from an entity focused on contract negotiation, contract formation, to an entity able to do its obligations and the tasks under the contract projects. This is not easy, and it requires a shift in mentality and in culture within the organization itself. And in this regard, we have done a lot of work. with the cooperation of our Russian partners and with the cooperation of our consultants to make this shift, to shift the organization mentality and the culture from an organization focused on contract formation to an organization able to do its obligations for the construction fees. And this is one of the unique challenges relating to NBB and relating to all owner and operators in newcomer countries. Also, HRD development. As you mentioned, Egypt is not a newcomer country from atomic point of view. From atomic point of view, Egypt is an old-timer. But from nuclear point of view, Egypt is a newcomer. And there is a difference between atomic energy and the nuclear power. So from nuclear power point of view, Egypt is a newcomer. And like any newcomer, we might face some difficulties regarding the HRD development. Yes, in Egypt, you can find a lot of nuclear power engineers, nuclear scientists, but actually the construction and the operation and the future maintenance of a large nuclear power plant requires a significant amount of human resources. And we have done a lot of work to actually to get the qualified and skillful Egyptian personnel that they will be able in the future to operate and maintain the nuclear power plant. Of course, we are doing this with the help, again, with our Russian partners, with our consultants, and we have our plans. We have HRD plan, a 7-year HRD plan, to recruit our personnel, to train them, and to actually make them able to operate and maintain the nuclear power plant. So this is another challenge we have faced in NBBA. I cannot actually leave the challenge part without mentioning Corona pandemic, because Corona pandemic was one of the challenges we have faced. And actually, with good cooperation with Russian party, depending on telecommunications, video conferences, and so on, we actually succeeded to overcome this difficulty, and this is a challenge as well. The last challenge I can mention here is the difference, how to achieve the integration between different cultures, different languages within the site, within one site. But actually, and it requires a mutual respect. And actually, we are so lucky because we have a good relationship with Russia, and this is good relation. We have historical relationship with Russia and with Russian people. And that's why I'm so happy to see the mutual respect between the Egyptian and Russian workers and personnel on site. I think these are the many challenges that any new country may face, especially in the beginning regarding the infrastructure. In addition, of course, to financing, because financing is a big problem for any African country if this country wants to start its nuclear power program with a large nuclear power. Thank you.
So much, Dr. El-Wakil. You mentioned a lot of important things there, including the importance of localization and capacity building. I like the idea of nuclear schools, and it has always been my dream to have those schools, deployed or built in every country in Africa. Thank you so much, and congratulations on a good job that you are doing. Now, the next speaker is Mr. Kirill Komarov, who is the first Deputy Chief Executive Officer for Development and International Business of Rosatom in Russia. Mr. Komarov, Rosatom used to work in different countries all over the world, be it in Hungary, Turkey, Bangladesh, India, and many other countries. You have nuclear power projects both in experienced countries as well as in newcomer countries. Now, can you tell us what services of Rosatom are available in African countries and what kind of support you as Rosatom may provide?
Thank you very much for your question. First of all, good afternoon, everybody. And let me express my big gratitude to be invited on such an important event like COP27, hosted by our very friendly country, Egypt, with such my congratulations, Dr. Amged, first of all, to you and to the whole Egypt with such a great event. It's a big honor for us to participate. Coming back to your question, I can answer that we work with our customer, first of all, on the basis of so-called integrated offer approach. That means that we not just build a nuclear power plant itself. We also support development of nuclear infrastructure in a country. We do care about personal training and education. We consider a proper amount of localization of equipment and services. Now, as you mentioned, we build nuclear power plants in 8 countries outside of Russia. And we see that in every country, the power plant projects involve different groups of stakeholders. It's a government, nuclear regulator, different financial structure, local producers. But first of all, there are people who live in the region. There are different non-commercial non-governmental organizations. We understand that we need to listen to all of them and to coordinate their interaction for the total success of the whole project. Integrated approach allows us to provide the best solution for each country needs. We are open for partnership, and also we are ready to implement different models of projects. It can be classical EPC contract like we work here in Egypt. It can be build, own, operate model like we construct the Akkuyu nuclear power plant in Turkey. We are ready to build not only large nuclear power plants, but also SMRs, what is now very popular and in a lot of discussion. Rosatom already has a floating SMR, Academic Lomonosov, which is in operation in Russia. We are currently constructing 4 new SMRs for the private mine project in Russia. And we are open to discuss energy supply from floating SMR fleet as a service. And the customer doesn't pay for the floating nuclear power itself, it pays only for electricity, which this plant is producing. It's important for us to deliver clean energy in a more efficient way. You have mentioned in your introduction speech a number of problems which African countries still face every day. I mean not only the access to electricity, I mean water deficit, I mean hunger, I mean dangerous diseases. Together with nuclear power plant, we also have non-energy solutions, such as seawater desalinating units, irradiation appliance for food safety, nuclear medicine technologies for diagnosis and therapy. We hope that all these solutions may support sustainable development of the whole African continent. With increasing importance of the sustainable agenda, we see a lot of opportunities for nuclear technologies. Nuclear power plant has a direct contribution to at least 4 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. For example, the LDABA project will contribute to goal affordable and clean energy, with more than 30 terawatt hours of clean electricity annually, and also to goal climate action with the economy of 15 million of tons of CO2 emissions per year. We hope that there will be a positive impact on goal decent work and economic growth, with creating direct thousands of jobs for nuclear power plant, because for each nuclear unit, you need at least 1,000 people in operation staff and a lot of people outside of nuclear power plant who can provide different services. There is the seaport, for example, as a part of LDABA project, which refers to the goal industry, innovation and infrastructure. With implementing the project, we used to develop social infrastructure, such as schools, medical centers, sport facilities, local transportation system, and it also works for the whole United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I want to mention that sustainability agenda is also challenging nuclear because there are a new ESG requirement arises. These requirements are usually fixed in the different taxonomies like European taxonomy or Russian taxonomy, and we understand that we can't ignore them if we want to be a part of future energy mix. There are requirements to prove safety of nuclear power plant operating, to guarantee stability of fuel solution. We also need to ensure our security of nuclear waste management. Rosatom has a certain experience of confirmation of these requirements. We already have attracted green financing for our project. Last year, for example, we have structured ESG credit for $800 million for Akkuyu NPP with Russian banks. We are happy to share our knowledge with our partners and customers and provide the best combination of these solutions for all countries on the African continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You mentioned that Rosatom is working on SMR project. Can you maybe share with us the timelines on when can we expect the first SMR to be connected?
The first SMR in Russia is already connected and is already in operation. It's producing energy since 2020. Yes, it's the first real commercial SMR in the world, because a lot of countries and a lot of companies are talking about SMR as a dream, but we already implemented this dream. We have working SMR. It's it's a very typical solution because it's located in a very far east of Russia, where centralized electricity is not available. And it's one of the best opportunities to use SMR, because SMR, first of all, it's very good for isolated regions where you do not have access to the centralized grid. But when you have opportunity to supply electricity for local needs. It's our first project. The second project we are implementing, it's a not floating SMR, it's a onshore SMR, and it's also very typical example. We have a very big northern region in Russia called Yakutia, very, very big and full of a lot of mineral resources. And all these mineral resources are very well known for many decades of years. But it's impossible to explore these resources from the earth because of the lack of electricity. And this is a closed circle. You do not have electricity. You cannot explore mineral resources. You do not explore mineral resources. You don't have demand for electricity. The government gives the permission to explore some mining with obligation of the owner of the mine to buy electricity for the local nuclear SMR. And this is a very good combination, and we started already this project onshore. We plan to finish it in 2028 to be able to produce the first onshore SMR electricity. But first floating SMR electricity is already produced during 2 years.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. We're going to move to the next speaker who is online. Let's check if he's ready. Professor Yusuf Aminu Ahmed, who is the chairman and the chief executive officer of Nigerian Atomic Energy Commission. Prof. Yusuf, can you hear me? Please confirm if you can hear us. Yes, loud and clear. Thank you so much.
However, with this technology, I think I can also be there with you. I've been following you since morning. As you are aware, as they have introduced Nigeria, we had a lot of challenges in electricity. But in the whole of African region, Nigeria is one of the countries that has challenges. Okay. There are two factors one can see. The first factor is one has to look at the size and population of Nigeria. But we are 50 African continent together. So that size demands us to also supply energy to each and every population of Nigeria. So for us to supply this energy, then we also have to look at the peculiarity of the communities we have. We're placed in the country that we have different regions and different kind of environments. So all energy sources can easily be obtained in Nigeria, from oil, natural gas, coal, biomass, hydro, solar, wind, everything. We are blessed with oil, we are blessed with sunshine, we are blessed with coal, we are blessed with all this. Now, our strategy in Nigeria is we can have an energy basket. So far, we are utilizing our oil and gas for electricity generation, as she mentioned earlier in the introduction. Majority of that comes from gas and oil. And then also, since we have a lot of rivers, we have harnessed hydro also. But with the clean energy, we realize that our gas and oil cannot be able to fit into that. But however, I'm happy that she mentioned the issue of energy transition to clean energy in Africa. African societies need to face the reality. If we say we want to jump into the transition quickly, without looking at some of the issues at stake, like economy and financing, and like the demand of our people in energy supply, like also our industrial development, agriculture, and transportation, and then there might be a lot of challenges. So in the energy transition, I think Africans need to take a very firm stand that either we have support in funding the transition so that we can be able to oil, gas, and other areas of energy, or we should be given a grace period within which to transit gradually. Now let's go back to the issue at stake, electricity deficit. Now, if you look at the deficit in Nigeria, we thought the remote societies, to look at their demand, is a little bit lower compared to the industrial sectors. So there you can have solar energy, you can supply them the little electricity that they need for the purpose of developing the economy. All what they need is micro and medium scale industries that cannot take much. But generally for industrial development, we need base load energy. And the only way we can get base load energy is either through hydro, or either through nuclear, or through the gas and oil. But we know definitely solar and others may not give us, it can give us peak energy, but it cannot give us base load energy. So that's why when you hear Nigeria is constructing or developing solar power generation, for us to reach the remote areas. I'm happy that the Rosatom is talking about the SMRs, because this is also another way to solve the problem of areas. Now, excuse me. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the issue of grid. We are intending to expand, because as we are expanding the gas and oil, including the hydro in Nigeria, we realize that our grid is very old and limited. We cannot be able to take all the electricity. So when we key into the nuclear power, we realize that we need to do expansion of. I'm happy to inform you the corporation of Siemens, Germany, have started expanding our grid. You might have heard that we have recently injected about 1,000 megawatts into expansion, and we hope to expand further so that at least when we go into nuclear, we can be able to offload the energy power plants to communities that we want. Then the other thing again, in building nuclear power, our motivation has to do with industrial development. As you are aware, industry, transportation, and agriculture, they all need what we call stable electricity. And that also became a challenge to us. And we think nuclear can also give us that in conjunction with our hydro, complement the energy, also clean energy successes. So I can go on and on, but major thing I think we also have to focus on, we have to look at our sustainable development goals and how are we going to key into the sustainable development goals by providing clean energy and also supplying our people. So Nigeria is going into an energy basket, and the energy basket mainly in future you can see Nigeria going into having hydro, which we cannot eliminate because of our resources available. You can see solar and renewable energy in Nigeria, also very available, and then probably nuclear, which we are working on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Yusuf, for sharing your country's energy strategy as well as the key challenges and the opportunities available. We are now going to move to the next speaker, who has just joined us. Welcome, Mr. Robert Sokpachi, who is the Director of Renewables and Nuclear Energy in the Ministry of Energy in Ghana. Mr. Sokpachi, Strategic National Energy Plan by 2030 of Ghana expects triple growth of hydro generation together with launch of nuclear power plant after 2030. Both sources are used to ensure base load of electricity generation, and both of them are recognized as low carbon. Is there any competition between hydro and nuclear? And could you also share with us what are pro and contra arguments when considering these two sources in Ghana?
Okay, thank you very much. First, I'll say Ghana started its energy supply with basically hydro from one of the largest man-made lake, the Akosombo Dam, where it is about producing about a little over 1,000 megawatts. So we're providing cheap power for aluminium smelting. And so we knew the use of cheap power for industrialization. So a point when in the early 20s, now you realize that gas thermal has overtaken the hydro. Now hydro is just contributing about a little over 30% of our generation mix and some small amount of renewable, and the rest is gas thermal. Yes, it was the vision that we were to double our hydro capacity, but it came to a point where in the mid-20s, where the main Volta river flows from, our northern neighbors also dam the river to also have energy security. So our projection for doubling became an issue. And then the smaller rivers also started drying up due to the issues of climate change. So the issue, we did analysis and realized that even if we are to dam all the rivers in Ghana, we are not going to even hit about 2,000 megawatts. So if we say there is a competition, there is no competition between, I'll say, nuclear and hydro. If we do all our assessments, we realize that we've exhausted all our large hydros. You look at our gas to power, by 2030s, we will having a shortage of gas to meet our electricity demand. We will only have to depend largely on LNG imports, which may be subject to international pricing, which will affect our electricity pricing, the tariff. So in 2008, the president asked that we do analysis to see the inclusion of nuclear. So nuclear was included in our energy policy in 2010, and then we signed in 2012 signed an MOU with the Russian government on assisting in developing our nuclear program. And then in 2015, we had an intergovernmental agreement to have a roadmap towards the inclusion of nuclear into our generation mix. So as at now, nuclear is not in competition. It is more like the holy grail in terms of our energy security. If you want to continue with our industrialization and our energy security, and if you look at our energy transition framework, introduction of nuclear in the early 2030s, and then by 2070, nuclear will be more than 50% of our generation mix. So nuclear is very key in our energy mix. And when we look at, so if we say our pros and cons here, I don't even know what to say about pros and cons because the hydro is not there anymore. Currently, the small hydros we have, we are only looking at using them as a hybrid to the intermittent renewable because renewable are intermittent, so we are trying to use the small hydros as a storage for solar and wind. So that during the day when the solar and wind is working, then the hydro comes in at night so that we can get some firm power for scaling up of our intermittent renewables. So that is what hydro is, the remaining hydro is going to play. So in the sub-region, I don't know anywhere in Africa, but in Ghana now we have a 1 megawatt floating solar as a pilot so that we'll be using our water bodies to be mounting our solar projects so that they become hybrid with the hydros. But for nuclear, it's supposed to come in as base load for our industrialization to provide the firm power. And Ghana is interconnected with all our neighbors, including Nigeria, including Niger, and all the way to Senegal. So we are looking to build more energy, nuclear power plants so that we can export to our immediate neighbors and to our far neighbors so that Ghana will become an energy hub because you look at Ghana because of our political stability and our friendly environment to do business, and the way we are interconnected with our neighbors. I mean, nuclear power, which will provide affordable energy, will be able to increase electricity access to our neighbors, because our electricity access in Ghana is now 88.5%, which is one of the highest in the sub-region. And we want to also assist our neighboring countries to also attain such a high level of electricity access, which will remove the energy poverty in the sub-region and also promote industrialization that is through clean energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sokrachi. I like that you keep mentioning the industrialization in your talk, because that's the very important part of Africa, and we need to think along the lines of development. For a very long time, we have been referred to as underdeveloped nations, and I don't know if it's supposed to be a permanent terminology. I really have a problem with this, because when do we then get to be a developed nations? Yeah, but yeah, thank you so much for that. I just want your take, not that I'm picking on you, on the power pool reactors, because we have an issue of financing these large-scale reactors on the African continent, and we have 5 regions in Africa. And I think, in my opinion, it's not just an opinion, it's something that has been proven, that when the large-scale reactors come, as a power pool, maybe if we say the West African nations, they partner in bringing a large-scale nuclear reactor, that is beneficial. That has more benefits, finance benefits, than when one country works in silo in deploying these reactors. So what's your take on the power pool reactors deployment?
That is true. It's not that we've not done it before. We did it with a cement factory, which is located in Togo. It is a West African cement factory. So yes, the West African countries can come together to agree to build one power plant in the power pool. There are various energy bodies in the sub-region who are coming together to do some projects. But nuclear particularly used to have some negative air around it. People don't want you to say it very loudly. When you want to say, some people hide it under clean energy and don't want to say that it's nuclear. For the first time, I see nuclear at COP. It is like seeing a waterfall on the desert. You never imagine it coming, but it is here. The world realized that nuclear is clean. So this is the time where we can bring the hard talk on the table, and also encourage institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to be able to be bold enough to forgo, I would say, the old story of not financing nuclear program and began to support
the country, my country. On that note, Mr. Knox Msebenzi, who is the Managing Director of the Nuclear Association of Africa. Good to have you. Your question is, South Africa's cabinet has approved an investment plan of $8.5 billion to accelerate the country's transition away from coal towards a clean energy. And these investments do not cover nuclear power plant construction projects, which is also under consideration now and will definitely contribute to South Africa's green future. Climate activists, the likes of Life Africa, used to claim that nuclear projects for their long period, they used to blame nuclear projects for their long period of construction because it is not aligned with the call for urgent climate action. Now, what is your opinion about developing nuclear generation in South Africa? And is it climate-driven? And what are the major reasons for developing NPP projects in the African region?
Thank you for the opportunity. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yeah. Thank you very much. In my view, the main challenge in South Africa is the lack of alignment between the president and the minister of responsible for energy policy. When the president speaks, he only speaks about renewables. When the minister who's responsible for energy speaks, he talks about a mixed bag of energy sources. So that really plunges the country into a sort of uncertain environment, policy uncertainty. In 2019, South Africa went through a rigorous process of defining an energy policy, which is now called the Integrated Resource Plan of 2019. That is still the resource plan that we have. But however, we are seeing certain moves to accelerate and depart from that without going through the same process of consultation. And that process included Parliament energy portfolio. But now it's a few people that have been chosen to advise the president on how to quickly move away from coal. In fact, I think that the world in general has abused the term just energy transition. When it was coined by the International Labour Organization, it was meant to move away from extractive sources of energy that were detrimental to the environment, to a more sustainable form of power generation, which included the participation of local communities and made sure that the jobs are not lost in the process. But anti-nuclear and anti-coal activists have taken it upon themselves to interpret just energy transition to mean a move from coal to renewables, and it's not true. The move is from extractive, polluting, and carbon-emitting sources to sustainable. That includes even clean coal, includes nuclear and all other energy sources. I believe that would be the best way to go forward. Even at COP27, I think there is some misinterpretation or deliberate misinterpretation driven by certain self-interest to exclude sources like nuclear. But fortunately, the world has now realized, since the dynamics from the beginning of this year in terms of energy, there has been a move to actually classify nuclear as green, which is good news to the world. The 8.5 billion that has been promised to South Africa, initially the public thought it was a grant, but it has turned out to be a loan, predominantly a loan. We are seeing in many instances the global north weaponizing money. This word weaponize is currently topical. Money is being weaponized to force the global south to accept or to coin policies that may not be of interest to the particular nations. Because the global north has got the money, most of this money which was made through colonial, in the colonial periods by exploiting the African continent and other developing countries. Now they've got the money, they're wealthy. They're holding back the money. They are saying, if you do not do what we tell you, we will not give you the money to do this. So we're in a bit of a conundrum in that sense. So we need fairness. I think if anything, this COP27 should have been addressing, I'm sure they've addressed that issue. And a lot of African countries have expressed their disappointment and their frustration at the hypocrisy that has been shown by the global north in terms of drive and when they don't have access to the gas that they thought they had. But when it is Africans that are told that you cannot have a new loan to build a coal power station, you can keep your coal underground. The only form of electricity that you can have is renewables, solar and wind, which is very unfortunate indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Msebenzi. You mentioned a very important point that as Africa, we are invited to join these terms that suits the developed nations. And in terms of just energy transition, we are going to end up with not an energy transition that is just, but just an energy transition, because we just want to process or to implement things that will not have impact on our economies. And also, I think that we need to communicate more as NIASA, the difference between, okay, no, not the difference, but the whole concept of sustainability, because people have turned sustainability to be about renewables and on. And sustainability also includes economic development and social development. And yeah, we need to try more in terms of communication when it comes to all these terminologies, because people get them confused. Some intentionally, but others not really intentionally. About to conclude, I'm going to ask all our speakers, including you, Dr. Yusuf, just 1 minute of your insight to this question. Nuclear power has a significant contribution to achieving net zero targets, together with energy security guarantee and positive effect for economic development for the region. On the other hand, banks and investors usually have low appetite to finance nuclear power projects, nuclear power plant new build projects, based on time, budget, risk, technological complexity. Now the question is, who should support financing for nuclear power plant projects, specifically in Africa? Is it a government, commercial?
And as you know, financing nuclear power project actually is a global challenge. And this challenge has faced all recent projects and all nuclear projects in the recent past. And to give you a simple answer, I think that any option or a combination of options you have mentioned could be a solution for financing a project. And the African countries should be open to any of these options, because at the end there is no one size fits all. There is no optimum option that we can all follow. So it depends on your negotiation power, the offer you can get from the vendor. And by the way, all vendors now actually offer a lot of support, and you can find a lot of support.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your question. Answering shortly, I can tell you, first of all, we need to remember that the time period of each nuclear project is very huge. We have 3-5 years of preparation work, including licensing, investigation on the site. We have now 5 to 7 years of construction. We are after 60 plus years of operation. I see plus because the technology gives opportunity to operate nuclear power plant even more. It's very difficult from the financial point of view. At the same time, it's not only a challenge, it's an advantage, because during 100 years, you have a very stable source of energy with a very predictable price. We all see what is going on the world market this year. When the price for gas, for example, goes up, not just to some percentage, it goes up several times. It goes up for maybe 10 to 15 times more than it was before. And taking into account that in a gas-based plant or coal-based plant, the cost of fuel, it's approximately from 70 to 80% of the final cost of electricity. The biggest advantage of nuclear is that the cost of fuel is less than 5%. Means even if uranium goes up 2 or 3 times, it doesn't reflect a final price of electricity. And it's a huge opportunity for not only for the government, but for the society, for the business people, to be sure that they have a very predictable, attractive source of electricity for many decades of years. And I think the main role of the government in each and every country, yes, it's possible definitely to use a model like we use here in Egypt to provide intergovernmental loan and to finance the project from the government sources. But if for some reason it's not available, the main role of the government is to establish a very clear and predictable rules for the future electricity. And if the investor has a guarantee for the future prices of electricity, if the consumer has a guarantee for the future price of electricity, it can be a solution, very good practical solution.
Thank you, Mr. Komarov.
As a principle in general, dependence on foreign loans makes Africa very vulnerable. If the continent could look into available resources, indigenous resources, like what Ethiopia did with its construction of hydroelectric power station, they really looked into internal funding mechanisms. There are many countries that have got huge amounts of money in pension funds, but those are not touched. We run to the IMF and World Bank and whatever and borrow some money to finance these high cost infrastructure projects. However, if we must borrow some money, we need fairness in terms of getting reasonable loans. It is said Africa does not borrow too much. Africa pays too much interest. That is where you find that you borrow some money today in US denominated loan, your currency runs to the bottom. And so you end up just basically emptying all your coffers in order to pay just the interest. So we have got a problem with the developed North as the African continent. So there are many other ways. The IAEA has got a whole booklet or advice on how to finance nuclear in developing countries. One of the options that is not looked at, but we're not happy to do the same thing when it comes to key infrastructure development. So it is a proven method of funding. The overall requirement is the governance around what happens with that money that we invest. It doesn't matter whether we locally invest or we borrow the money from international funding organizations. If we do not govern, if we do not administer the use of that money in the form of rampant corruption, then we will go nowhere.
Thank you, Mr. Msebenzi. Dr. Yasov, your take on the question?
Thank you very much for all speakers. I think my experience as the chief executive of the Nigeria Atomic Energy, that the government of Africa, all governments of Africa need to understand the fact that MPP has impact on national economy and sustainability. Once we can convince our governments that nuclear power plants can contribute to the economy of the country and sustainability of our countries, then we can start from there. We need to focus again on the issue of energy security and then energy stability. And once also the government knows the job creation, quality of life, then I think governments can buy into supporting the nuclear power plant. I'm saying this because some governments don't see why you have hydro, you have oil and others. Why should you go into power? And I think this is what to start with. But again, when you talk about financing of the general nuclear power plant, yes, there are challenges in financing. Each country has its own. Smaller countries can go into small and medium power plants like SMRs, which can be able to give them energy for stations. Because I'm saying this, there are countries in Africa which are just maybe a region in some Africans, but then again, you see them wanting to power plants. I don't see that as sustainability in their own country because the energy that they require may not be more than SMRs, not bigger power plants in the coast. So I think if we can convince international organizations and development partners that as part of clean energy, that they need to support countries, that one is also a financing. But also my brother from South Africa has mentioned about the vendor. If the vendor doesn't want to go into full-fledged building of a facility like nuclear power plant, they can think an option also can give us the funding that we may require. But again, the major funding only comes from private-public partnership. private industries today in our countries, whether foreign direct investment, whether local industries, they all suffer from electricity. Most of their cost of production is going through diesel or other means of generating electricity for their factories. So if they can be a stakeholder, I think that way you can pull conglomerates of companies, factories, like for instance, if Dangote Group in Nigeria or Boa Group in Nigeria, these are multi-billion naira factories. They can pull resources together and support a vendor, be able to finance electricity generation, then they can get the best loans they need for their industry. And I think that also is a way we can get funding of MPP. But however, whatever we want to do, please, I want us to understand that NPP has impact on our economy and also for achieving sustainable development. Once we do that, then you will see government supporting this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Yusuf. You've said a mouthful. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we open the floor for questions. Thank you. Please do introduce yourself before you ask the question. It's off.
You know that now nearby in the conference center, there's debate what we should understand as climate financing. In terms of common understanding, it's going to be quite a sad story, but it's true. There's no consensus on this. What does it mean, and how this term need to be used or should to be used? So my question is slightly provocative, but still. So how you would see the description of climate financing in the way that it would, this description, defend the interest of nuclear power financing in different dimensions of this understanding? So whether it would be worse if inside the description of the climate financing, there would be some words devoted to the nuclear power exploration, exploitation, or so on and so forth. So this is my question. And God knows, maybe afterwards we will manage to send it to those who negotiate the term nearby. Thank you. So it's for,
Thank you so much.
For both probably Egypt colleagues and Kirill Kamarov. Yes, both. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your question. And I can see that in recently we started to recognize that there is large recognition of nuclear power as a green and sustainable. And this was clear in this actually conference here in COP27. And in the, actually in EU taxonomy as well, and in many of other countries like Korea. So I think this will actually create new mechanisms for financing nuclear power projects, like green bonds, for example. I think with green bonds, with carbon certificates, the countries can get enough finance and fund to create and build and construct nuclear power plants. And this is actually something we noticed, and I think this will benefit the new comer countries, especially in Africa. Thank you.
Mr. Kamarov?
Thank you very much for your question. I fully agree with my colleague from South Africa that today we have a problem when we talk about sustainable energy. In the majority of cases, we think only about solar and wind, what is not correct, definitely. And the main problem we need to solve immediately is how to make this definition equal to all sources or carbon-free sources of energy. And I fully agree that even coal shouldn't be forbidden if coal works in accordance with the principles of green energy, because everything is possible from technological point of view. It's only depends how much you are ready to pay for it. And definitely nuclear energy should be defined as much as possible as a green source of energy. And it's very important to underline it, because what we see very often, we see that even countries who are developing in a very active way new nuclear project do not define nuclear energy as a green source of energy. And I think it's just a heritage of previous time period, but we need to have now some real change of the story. Russia, for example, is fully committed to define nuclear as a green source of energy. We did it already, honestly, a year ago in previous September, when our government approved the Russian taxonomy of sustainable projects, and when without any debates or double understanding, we put nuclear just directly as a green source of energy. It's what we expect from the majority of countries. Doesn't matter are they developed countries or developing countries. We expect the same. European Commission did it already with some conditions, but they did it. We expect the same position from the majority countries of the world, to define nuclear in a very clear way, like a green source of green energy in the world.
Thank you so much. We do have a hand, yeah?
The Russian network of United Nations Global Compact. My question is about, I heard a lot on the US Center platform these days about multi-purpose benefits of the nuclear energy and SMRs, which the US government was promoting these days very actively. Could you please elaborate a little bit on this? Because there was said a lot, not only about energy for electricity, but also for ammonia, for fertilizers, for desaltification of ocean water, etc. How about that?
It's not a new idea, and SMR is on the world agenda already many years. And we really believe that it's a very interesting and attractive solution. But we need to remember that it's a very specified solution, and it's first of all, its mission is how to provide an energy, as I said, in isolated regions, in the regions which are not connected with a centralized grid. Another reason to use SMR can be if the energy system of a country is not quite big, because if you want to construct a big nuclear power plant, you need to think, is it comfortable for the energy system of country or not? Especially for some small countries, the SMR solution can be much attractive because it's in a balance with existing facilities. But I didn't want to support the idea it's SMR, it's only one way how we can develop nuclear energy. It's what we hear time to time from it's like a position. I really believe that all nuclear energy solutions should be available for each and every country. It's a country right to choose what kind of energy solutions the country wants to use. Should it be nuclear or should it be hydro? Because yes, we heard a very good speech from our colleague from Ghana, and Ghana, it's a very lucky country. They have a lot of hydro resources. Hydro resources are available in a country, but it's not the same story for Egypt, for example, where hydro resources are limited. They are already in use. It's a lot of attractiveness to use hydro resources, but it's not possible to do it in all countries of the world. That's why the right of each and every country for the specific choice, unique choice, national choice of nuclear of energy mix, it's a right of a country, and with all our respect to each and every country position, we should be very pragmatic here. And yes, SMR can be a good solution, but not everywhere, let me say so.
Do we have more questions? Twice. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We've come to the end of our session today. Thank you for joining us, and please give our speakers a big round of applause.